In the beginning, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat.
No, Odysseus, let him rack his brains with you and the other captives how to fight
guilty.
Impossible. Trust me.
No one to weep for me, my friends. No wedding song.
Arma verumque cano, Troiae qui primus laboris Italiam
Dante ha fatto il pieno e per gli altri è rimasto ben poco, which means that Dante filled up.
I was the more deceived.
Confess that you were very bad to hurt my feelings.
Cried Candide, I'm through.
Enough. Who are you then?
Part of that force which would do evil evermore, and yet
She was eating a maraschino ice at that precise moment.
There is no
When Gregor Samsa woke up one morning, he found himself changed in his bed into a monstrous dung beetle.
I'm standing in front of the Avon River and right next to the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, England, the well-known birthplace of William Shakespeare. Shakespeare confronts us, as perhaps no other author will read this term, with the very difficult question of tradition and the individual talent. That is, how do we explain the genius of a man who created a body of work like Shakespeare's? This term we read perhaps his most famous play, and perhaps the most famous play in the English language, Hamlet. A difficult play to be sure, but a play that confronts us with a world very much like our own. A world of hazard, a world of riddles, a world of darkness, a world where what seems to be is not always what is, and who seems to be is not always who they are. That was a rather heavy and runic beginning to Hamlet. That was at Stratford-upon-Avon. What a glorious day that was. You saw the opening sequence there. I was walking right toward Shakespeare's birthplace. And if, like most people, you've been reading Shakespeare all your life, it really is quite a thrill to be reminded that Shakespeare was a person, not a name in a text. And it was kind of fun to see the birthplace and to be there at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre at Stratford-upon-Avon. No teleprompter for that introduction, amazing. I want to, before we leave Dante, yes, back to Dante. Before we leave Dante, I liked very much the way the class formed there, the way the ideas formed at the end. And I do feel like I need to make the point that one of the things that Dante invents is a new epic. You'll remember that Dante puts himself in the company of Homer and Virgil. Barbara, you were asking about Virgil and Virgil's role. And Virgil is very much his guide, both in terms of faculty psychology and in terms of art. He is following in the great epic tradition of Virgil. And I just want you all to think about the new heroism. You saw Achilles' heroism. You saw Hector's heroism. You saw Aeneas's heroism, which was quite different from Achilles and Hector's. And I just want you to think about Dante's heroism. What is the new heroism in this new world? And it perhaps is not the exterior battlefields, not the battlefield outside the self, but the new battlefield is the battlefield inside oneself. And that's the journey that Dante takes, and that's where his warfare occurs. And I just did not feel our class was complete until we hit that point. I think you could have done that on your own because we were moving in that direction, but I just, a sense of closure, I needed to do that. No more Dante now, let's go. We move from Dante to Shakespeare, and another one of these great leaps in time here, but this one only about 300 years, not so great a leap, but goodness gracious, what has happened in the interim? Ptolemy's universe has been replaced by a Copernican universe. Remember we were talking about that. The concept of the king, very much written into the fabric of this play that we're going to read. Where does the king get his authority? What are the qualities of the good king? Can a bad man be a good king? Do we necessarily have to be a good person to be a good leader? Interesting dilemma. Yes, it's a very good question, yes, raised by this play. And the whole notion of reason ruling the individual. Are we more angel than beast, or are we more beast than angel? Hamlet, perhaps as no other play, talks about that curious middle state that we as human beings exist on. He accuses his mother of being bestial in marrying Claudius so soon after his father's death. Even a beast, he says, would have waited longer. But in the other breath, he can talk about what a piece of work is man, and talk about his angelic qualities as well. This is the play, guys, right? This is the play you get down on your knees and bow in front of, right? You handle this one with velvet gloves. Obviously not. I mean, this, well, while this is the play, I think, what did T.S. Eliot call it? The Mona Lisa of literature. Marvelous, you know. You can't quite ever get it, you know. But let's start with questions. Questions on Hamlet. I'm sure you have plenty of them. Yeah, Barbara?
Well, I don't know if this is exactly a question, but I was trying to make an analogy. Hamlet is a very thoughtful, extremely thoughtful, indecisive hero at the beginning. He reminds me a little bit of Aeneas. Aeneas has to be directed in the Aeneid. He lands on the shore and he thinks he's going to stay there, and then his mission is changed. He's thoughtful. I mean, we did discuss that he becomes a very mature individual. Yeah. And Hamlet is grieving so much at first, which could be called a sin under certain circumstances, under certain Greek ways. I mean, he is perhaps to the king's mind over-grieving.
He definitely is, and to his mother's as well. The first words out of his mother's mouth to him is, "Cast off thine inky cloak." Yeah.
And then he is given his mission by a higher power, his father's shade. So.
Yes, well, by a higher power or by a lower power, Hamlet doesn't know. That's the problem, isn't it? And when you get your injunctions from ghosts, it's, you know, really, you've got to, what is this? You know, it's not like somebody came down physically and talked to him. It was the image of his father. And was he a good ghost or a bad ghost? And that remains a question through much of the play. Explaining, of course, what you called Hamlet's indecisiveness. I wonder if we want to blame him for that indecisiveness. Another way of talking about it is that he's thoughtful, that he is aware of the fact that his father's ghost might be the devil challenging him.
And the ghost has his own mission. He can't get out of his present state of fire until his sin is made open, and you know it has to be avenged.
Right. That's what gets the revenge tragedy plot in gear. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And I don't think Claudius understands Hamlet's grieving. The two parts of his grieving. It wasn't just for his father's death, but for his mother's early marriage. Yeah. And that seemed to be more dominant in his mind.
Yeah, Hamlet's in a tough position, isn't he, in the opening of the play? He's a student. The way I do this with my students at my host university is to put them in the position of coming home from spring break and finding your uncle in your father's favorite chair. Yeah. It's a little disconcerting. You know, and that's what Hamlet is confronted with at the opening of this play. Yeah, it's a tough position, to be sure. Other questions? I want to let you give some shape to this. Yeah.
I was wondering why Prince Hamlet didn't become King Hamlet on the death of his father.
That's a great question. That's a great question. You must never lose sight. Yes, you must never lose sight of the fact that Claudius is elected You must understand this. This is very important. Don't lose sight of this. Claudius is a very mysterious character at the beginning of this play, isn't he? But please understand, he is every inch the king. He has sent out ambassadors to, and has staved off warfare as a result. He has healed the court, in that the court has agreed to his and has rallied in support of his marriage to Gertrude. Don't forget that there are armies on the border prepared to attack, and so succession becomes very important when Hamlet Sr. dies, and he seems able to handle all of this. In one of the best modern productions of this play, done by the BBC with Derek Jacobi as Hamlet, you know, the fellow who played I, Claudius. The fellow who plays unfortunate analogy there, but the fellow who plays Claudius in Hamlet is Patrick Stewart, whom you may know as Jean-Luc Picard on the Star Trek series. Yeah, you see him with a head of curly hair, and it's quite disconcerting. But he's very much the executive in charge, which raises, as I said in the beginning here, a very interesting problem, a political problem, you know? Who says kings have to be good guys? Maybe the qualities necessary for leadership, for executive leadership, are not the qualities of a Hamlet. Maybe you can think too much, you know? You get an interesting triumvirate of people who are avenging deaths of their fathers in this play, and you need to keep that in mind as well. And the three clearly are Fortinbras, Laertes, and Hamlet. And think of how they're arranged. It's really quite interesting. Hamlet is the excess of one thing. Laertes may be the excess of another thing. And it's interesting that the state ultimately goes to Fortinbras at the end of the play. Fascinating idea. So keep that political notion in mind. I should tell you, let me warn the folks in the control room that now would be a good time to go to a little interview I did with Professor Michael Hattaway, who's the chair of the English department at the University of Sheffield, head of the English department. He's written several books. He's also one of the general editors of the Cambridge University Guide to Renaissance Drama. And this is his latest. It's called Hamlet, An Introduction to the Variety of Criticism. Here's Mick.
One of the things when you're studying Hamlet, I think, is that you do have to consider not just the personality of the hero, but the situation in which he finds himself. There's been a lot of ink spilt about the personality of the hero, and we've been told, mainly by romantic critics, that he's somebody who thinks so much that he's incapable of making up his mind. I'd put Hamlet in a far more positive light and say that he can't really make up his mind because he knows how difficult the problems are. You said he was adolescent, and that's right. One of the things I think which he chooses to suppress is awareness of the particular political situation in Denmark. He refuses to remember that that Denmark is an elective monarchy, and that the council, in fact, have decided that Claudius would make a better king than he, Hamlet, would be. And that, of course, is disconcerting. It goes back to the point I was making earlier, that the play is asking whether or not a bad man might not make a really good king, whether a great man need be a good man. Those are some of the big questions that the play asks.
Let's talk about Claudius. He's an absolutely compelling character, and yet for much of the beginning of the play, an utterly mysterious character.
Well, I don't like to say it, but I think there's a lot going for Claudius. Claudius does confess that he's murdered his brother. Now, Hamlet, of course, doesn't actually hear what Claudius says. Maybe Hamlet suspects something, oh my prophetic soul, from the beginning. But the hard question is it necessary to take a man off the throne who is a murderer? Now, of course it is, but let's look at the the full situation. Claudius is a very good peacemaker. Claudius confronts the warlike Fortinbras, who is invading Denmark, as we've seen, for a very particular and private reason. And although I don't like to admit it, because I'm a child of the 60s and so on, and I demonstrated against the nuclear bomb and all of that, one does have to admit that with hindsight, the strategic deterrent does seem to have worked. And that's what Claudius's strategy is. He has a strategic deterrent. He is preparing a great arsenal in Denmark, and he is sending out ambassadors to negotiate with Fortinbras. Now, all of these devices seem to work, whereas Hamlet, obsessed by his private problems, really is capable only of acting impulsively, and maybe that is not the stuff that greatness is made of. So, we also don't know, of course, about Claudius. Claudius maybe didn't know what he was about. He didn't know whether he wanted the crown or whether he wanted his sister-in-law, whether he wanted to get into Gertrude's bed. And poor Claudius is an agonized person. Sometimes it's difficult to think of Hamlet as agonizing at all. I'm not certain. I saw a production in the 60s where Claudius really won out on the mousetrap. Now, how could that happen? I think, like most of my generation, my Hamlet was the Olivia Hamlet that we all saw on film. And then Peter Hall, in about 1963, did a production that was very much of our time. It had Glenda Jackson as Ophelia, playing a guitar, a student, Hamlet with a long scarf, his sea gown scarfed about him, another student, a set of unattractive bureaucrats carrying around briefcases. But in The Mousetrap, there was a marvelous piece of invention. I can't say that it was right, but nor can I say that it was wrong. Generally, Claudius gives the game away at the end of The Mousetrap. And I remember the actor in the Olivia production getting up as if and the mousetrap had grabbed his neck, smashed into his neck. "Give me some light!" In this production, the Claudius, who was Brewster Mason, got up and looked at Hamlet in disgust. "Give me some light. You pullulating adolescent," he seemed to be saying. "Why don't you go out and mow the lawns? Get on with the jobs that you should be doing. You are making nasty insinuations, and I am not having any of this. This is totally indecorous." And with great dignity, he walked out of the court. In other words, there's no indication in the text that Claudius has to give the game away at that stage, which means that Hamlet still has got a problem. He hasn't discovered whether or not what the ghost has said is right or not.
That was a marvelous anecdote, wasn't it, about that 60s production? You know, the mousetrap he's referring to, of course, is the play within the play, The Murder of Gonzago. And it is at that point, it's that point that usually is the climax of the play, where we discover that Claudius really is guilty as he jumps up and "Give me some light." But what a nice wrinkle to just change the tone of those lines. And the mousetrap then does not become a mousetrap at all. The thing remains loaded and never does actually strike. Mick Hattaway was an absolutely charming host to us when we were at University of Sheffield. He was generous beyond belief, absolutely nice guy, and you must all run out and read everything he ever wrote. Okay? No, he was a splendid host to us. Hamlet, the play, huh? You want to talk about why? You've all seen productions of it, I'm sure. You've all read it, I'm sure. What is it about this play that has such a hold on us? Aren't you waiting for Kenneth Branagh to do Hamlet? Yeah. What about that? Anybody want to try to answer that? Yeah.
Well, I can start.
Yeah.
The wisdom in the psychology it's almost on every page, and it's just so universal. And it speaks to us today. I mean, Polonius's lines to Laertes and to Ophelia are just as important today. I mean, they're just so wise. They're just wonderful.
It seems like a very different world from our own. Is it, or is it very much like our world? I'm curious to get your reaction to that. Eric, can I pick on you and ask, in what ways is it like our world?
Well, it may be like parts of our world. I'm very aware of the sense of power that goes on along with royalty and kingship, and it's right at the center of the state, which seems out of the ordinary experience of most of us who are reading this. I don't know if there's anything in contemporary literature that lets us see as clearly what power is like in our times.
And that even that power is problematic, isn't it, in this play? Because as Mick points out, and as we've been talking, the king may not be what he appears to be. We are in the world of this play very much in a world of appearances masking realities, and it's at every turn you see a kind of seeming. It's written right into the fabric of the play. Look at how, I mean, the very opening of the play is a question asked in darkness about identity. The very first words of the play. And indeed, that's one of the things this play is all about, you know, is cutting through the artifice, cutting through the seeming to get to what is. That's poor Hamlet's dilemma, isn't it? He's confronted with this power, as you talk about, and you're right. You have the court, and you have a king, and you have a queen, and you have Polonius as the advisor, the kind of Henry Kissinger of the Secretary of State, or however you want to describe it, but the wise counselor, the wise advisor. And then, let's look at these people. Claudius may be a murderer. From Hamlet's point of view, his mother, who was the very paragon of virtue, may be, I don't know what adjective to use for her, but it's not going to be...
Adulterous.
Yeah, incestuous. Yeah. Incestuous sheets is the expression used. Polonius, for all his occasional insights, is an utter windbag. I mean, he's just so puffed full of hot air. We think of him affectionately, to be sure, but he's like every bad uncle you've ever imagined, prepared to give you advice at every turn, and spend 800 words doing it. So the counselor is full of bull. This is some world we live in. Give off thine inky cloak, it doesn't seem right. And Hamlet says, seems, madam, I know not seems. His first words to his mother, and yet that's all he knows. He says, I know not seems. He suggests that my outer appearance, my inky cloak, is in keeping with my mental state, with my emotional state. There is no dislocation between what I appear to be and what I am. I know not seems, and yet he lives in a world of seems. The ghost seems to be his father, but maybe it isn't, The mousetrap is a play within a play. Talk about seeming. You want to talk about webs. You've got a player king watching a player king, and then you've got Hamlet watching the player king and the player king, and you might start to wonder, where am I in all this, I become a player in all of this too. It's written right into the fabric of the play. It's a very mysterious play. It's a very riddling play. Ophelia seems to be all sweetness and light, and yet we know she's a trap. She's being used. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they are such non-entities that Ophelia even gets them backwards. Remember, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, they're just interchangeable. Are they his friends? Ooh. Hardly, huh? They're not his friends. You all with me on this? This is a tough play in terms of what's real and what just seems to be real. And we'll see next time, we'll get a little closer into the text next time, and you'll see how this is written right into the fabric of the play. Does art, in other words, this is at the center of this play, does art hold the mirror, as it were, up to nature? As Hamlet talks about the player's art, right, in preparing for the play within the play. He talks about art, how art is a reflection of nature, reveals nature, or does it conceal? The art that can conceal the harlot's cheek, plastered art. You all with me on this? It's very interesting. So does it reveal or does it conceal? It's a tough world that Hamlet has to operate in. You notice that Mick referred to something I had said just before. I referred to Hamlet as an adolescent. Do you agree with me? Mm-hmm. It seems to me adolescents are always bemoaning the fact that the world doesn't conform to the way they think it ought to be.
But isn't he beyond that? He's a university student. You feel maybe he's at that thoughtful age where he rebels against certain things and trying to find his own being, in a sense.
Yeah. Do you see him, I'm curious to get reactions to him, do you see him as a kind of adolescent, that he lives in a kind of black and white world? Or talk to me about that. How do you view him?
I see him coming back and trying to adjust to a responsibility which has been laid upon him by his father's ghost. To avenge him, but not do it in such a fashion that, in other words, to be as devious with Claudius as Claudius was with his father, which lays a tremendous burden on him. And his approach to it, this confusion and overbearing grief, while it's there, he's using as a cover-up as he plans and takes action.
That's interesting. A lot of people, of course, have seen Hamlet as the great actor within the play.
Yes.
How much of his madness is real, how much of it is feigned? How much of his grief is real, how much of it is feigned?
With Rosencrantz, now you have Midway and
Guildenstern, yeah.
He acts with them, although he knows what they plan to do. He acts as though he trusts them. With his friends, Marcellus, he says, this is what I want you to do, but don't say anything about it to anyone else. Right. So that he's constantly putting on facades for various people, all with this basic responsibility he came back to, loaded on top of his natural grief.
Okay, so you see him as much more as a strong and forceful character, able to manipulate circumstances around him.
I don't want to say manipulate, because to me manipulate is underhanded, something like Claudius. I think what he did was carefully planning what he had to do to be effective in the burden put upon him by his father's ghost.
All right, now let me be just a devil's advocate in here and say what a mess he made of things. Look at all who die because of that. Polonius. Does he deserve to die? Yeah. Ophelia. Does he deserve to die? Laertes. Does he deserve to die? You understand where I'm going with this? What a mess he made of things. Wow.
A Greek hero would probably just go in and kill him and get it over with.
Certainly the epic hero, sure.
But you have to remember,
we're in a different world here, though.
The theology of the day. He didn't want to kill Claudius.
Not at prayer.
At prayer and send him straight to heaven.
That's right.
He wanted to get him when he didn't have a chance to repent, like his father. That was the sorrow of his father. He didn't get a chance to repent.
That's what stops him from killing the king at prayer. The irony, of course, is the king's not at prayer. He just seems to be. Yeah, we want to make that point repeatedly.
But the ghost also leaves him, besides telling him that he has to avenge him, he leaves him with these two injunctions. Mm-hmm. Taint not thy mind. Mm-hmm. And then leave your mother to heaven. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So they bear on his actions too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And certainly the taint not thy mind he violates.
Why?
by his decision to send, you know, to take Claudius, not at this hour, but at some time when he is in sin, to guarantee the fact that his soul will go to hell, because that's the worst thing that he can think of to have happen to him.
Yeah. So it's not the killing that's enough for him. He wants him to go to hell as well.
Oh, no, he could have done that right away.
Sure. Is this an example of Hamlet thinking too much? Is this the intellectual's curse here, as McAdaway would kind of put it? That not that you kind of blame Hamlet for indecisiveness, but that his mind is so nimble, his mind takes in so much that it kind of paralyzes the activity.
Doesn't the father say, leave her to heaven?
Well, it's the same as to say leave her to God, that it's God's judgment. Yeah. Do you, there's a lot of stuff I just want to get out on the table, and I really will use the second hour of discussion to kind of tie together. I'm curious if you think Hamlet has a tragic flaw, and if he does, what is it? It's a classic kind of tragedy question, right? You know, we find the hamartia, we find the tragic flaw. Is it hubris? No, it doesn't seem to work here, does it? What is it?
It might be his depression, perhaps his melancholy.
His melancholia?
His
anger at his mother.
His,
That's something I don't know.
affects his decisions.
Thinking too much?
Think too much, you know. Aren't you worried about that concept? Thinking too much.
You see both sides of everything.
See, I'm back to where we started with whether a person in a position of executive power can be an intellectual. You know, I mean, you don't want your general sitting there paralyzed on the battlefield going, well, I might, but then again, I might, you know, it's, you gotta act.
I think it's, you know, I think it's his character, the fact that he's indecisive, that making a decision is very difficult for him. He brings it, a lot of people are like that. A lot of people in business fail because they are like that.
Sure.
They get all the way up to the decision when it's time to make the decision, and they can't do that. Then they back away and start seeing the things that are wrong with making that decision. They go all the way up to it again, but they can't do it. And he vacillates.
And when he does make a decision, it's rash, right?
He didn't think things through, what was going to happen after all these other things occurred.
He's in the bedroom with his mother, and he looks, you know, sees a little movement behind the arras, and it's got to be the king, right? Thrusts him through, and Polonius falls. Phew, boy.
Wouldn't have been there if Claudius hadn't sent him.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, to spy. Yep, lots of spying going on in this world. Yeah, in this fallen world of Hamlet. Come on, some more on the tragic flaw. Come on, Come on, where's the Oedipal people here? Come on, where are the arms going? He's in love with his mother. It's unhealthy. Come on, what is this? Anybody want to talk about that? Charlie.
Introspection to the point of incapacitation.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we've been saying here. Yeah, it's thinking too much. Yeah, you can't be so introspective.
Well, one impulsive motion that we just talked about was bad news for Polonius.
Yes, it sure is very bad news for Polonius.
He didn't think that went through too much.
Yeah.
And that had disastrous results.
You almost think of him as a little spoiled. It wasn't so much, perhaps, that his mother, which was bad enough that she married his uncle, but that she wasn't there for him anymore. He wanted his mother to be there for him.
There's your Oedipal struggle. There's your Oedipal struggle, right? Yeah. And he's supposed to refer to Claudius as father, and oh my goodness, ooh, that's tough to do. And you know, Ernst Jones, who was a aide to Freud, wrote the famous piece on Hamlet and Oedipus, having this kind of Oedipal struggle with the father for the affections of the mother. You know, the famous Olivier Hamlet that I'm sure you're all familiar with plays that one out. And there are hints at it, you know, throughout.
Pre-Freud, I'm sure Oedipus didn't enter the picture at all in the relationship with the mother.
Well, it did from the ancients.
Yeah,
yeah.
But I mean, the emphasis was since Freud it became more rampant, this Oedipal thing.
It has, you're absolutely right. That reading of the play is a peculiarly 20th century reading of the play, to be sure. Yeah. How is it reading this play? You obviously know that this was not designed to be read. This was designed to be seen, and it puts tremendous demands upon you as a reader in that you have to be actor, obviously. You have to be director, obviously. You have to be producer, obviously. You have to be audience. It's a lot of stuff to have to do. What was it like? Was it tough?
I found that he has such a rich vocabulary and somewhat obsolete. I mean, there are words that I was sitting with my dictionary open the whole time I was reading to make sure I had the essence of what he said instead of what I assumed he said. But his choice of words was just splendid. I really enjoyed it for the reading itself.
Yeah, there are extraordinary memorable speeches in here. Some of the most famous speeches from Shakespeare obviously come out of Hamlet, the most famous being the to be or not to be speech, of course.
I like to read it out loud. I
It's
think
the
it
best
makes
way.
it
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. It really is the best way, is to read it out loud, is to hear it. A lot of the language is very difficult. It's riddling, it's puzzling, it's part of the fabric of the world. Of Hamlet, lots of puns. You notice that? Lots of punning going on. And what is punning if not language moving simultaneously on several levels?
Use so much of his language today, to thy own self be true.
Yeah, right.
He's a wonderful wordsmith that rings through the ages.
Well, that's true. And you need to know that the English language was in flux as Shakespeare is writing this. And it is good to have a glossary when reading Shakespeare. Most editions will do that for you. They will gloss certain words for you. But it really is essential to know that words don't always mean what you think they mean. Here we go again.
But when you're reading it, it's this Elizabethan exuberance before they standardized language carries you along.
Yeah.
And you find yourself guessing generally accurately at what it means because the meaning comes through to you.
Yes.
But there's just such vitality to it that it's in excess all the time.
Yeah.
But that was the age.
Yeah, well, it partly is. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there was a delight in language, to be sure. Yeah. But a tough read, I think, for most people reading Shakespeare for the first time. This is not the one you want to start with, because a lot of the utterances in madness are tough to follow. I can't let go of character flaw yet. I want to hear some more about this. Yeah.
The way he used people, such as Ophelia. I mean, he treated her shabbily. I haven't read the whole play yet, so but he treated her, and probably the same with Laertes too.
I want to do a feminist reading of this play next week because I think that'll be interesting to you. The women in the play are very interesting, and one wonders if Gertrude is treated as shabbily as Ophelia is. I mean, what has Gertrude done that's so wrong?
In our day, nothing.
She was
back
totally
then,
sheltered by her husband, according to what Hamlet saw, saying that he was seeing it through his father was such a caring husband. He complained if the breeze was too rough on her face. And so let's take that as an indication of how she lived, sheltered from practically everything, every disturbance. And then suddenly she finds herself without any of that.
Gertrude wouldn't have had any place after her husband's death, and by marrying her, Claudia restored her to her position. And also biblically, didn't they say brothers should marry the widow of the...
That's an ambiguity, but that's an ambiguity in this play. It's deliberately ambiguous in this play. Yeah.
But she didn't fare so badly. I mean, if she married him, she still was the queen.
And on the political level, look what she's done. Don't ever lose sight of that political level, as Mick suggests, that heals the state, keeps the state whole, that marriage. That's important. That marriage is important.
And he has already resolved that with her.
Again?
At that time, it was thought of as incest.
That's wonderfully ambiguous in this play. I can't give you an answer to that. The play doesn't want to give you an answer to that because that would reduce how you view the marriage.
One thing was his tragic flaw that he loved too much. He loved his father too much. So he had to do this.
Loved too much. Boy, what a weird world.
He loved his mother too much.
Yeah.
Love was excessive. He loved Ophelia in the beginning, but when he was acting, he he went about acting mad, but I don't think that diminished his love for her. He had to tell her, go to a nunnery. It's part of his act. But I think in the beginning there were indications that he did love Ophelia.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
in the
no,
end,
he
it
definitely
does.
did.
He said, I loved her 1,000 brothers.
Yeah,
and
right, yeah.
Yeah.
But look how poisoned Hamlet's view of humanity becomes. I mean, to me, he, I'll throw my own idea here, it is a little adolescent in that here is mother not conforming to Hamlet's ideal of behavior, and here is possibly uncle not conforming to ideals of behavior, and it poisons his entire view of human life. Get thee to a nunnery, why shouldst thou be a breeder of sinners? You know, it's his whole view of humanity gets poisoned to the point where he wonders why he should even live, to be or not to be.
Part of that problem, seeing him as an adolescent, may be our familiarity with Olivier's presentation of Hamlet. I mean, he was not an adolescent when he did the role. It's...
Yeah, I meant adolescent in attitude, I think. Yeah, I don't...
Right, but, well, okay, I was thinking I liked Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet because he cast real teenagers in the parts, and...
Yeah, Hamlet's going to be a young student. You know, I don't know how old we'll make him. It doesn't really matter, does it? We'll make him about 18 or 19. We'll do.
Meant to be a house of ill repute rather
That's
than
correct.
a convent.
That's correct. Well, it's
so
both.
That changes
it's
the whole
both.
interpretation.
Yeah, exactly. It's both simultaneously. Yeah.
He was very cruel to Ophelia.
Terribly cruel to Ophelia. Yeah, yeah.
Aeneas to Dido.
Aeneas to Dido. Well, not quite. Yeah, not quite. But.
I think you could call him an idealist, though. You know, a young idealist, and they can be very cruel. They have tunnel vision, and they see the world only through
very starkly.
Very starkly.
Yeah.
And they often don't like humanity.
Yes.
They can find something wrong with everybody.
Yes, because they fall short of
what
it
think
ought to
they
be. Yeah, right. So what does Hamlet learn during the course of the play? Does he learn anything? Does he carry that view to the grave, or is his vision enlarged during the course of the play?
Goes around and
Man, you guys are squirming on these questions. Yeah. You know, I think it's an important and serious question. He undergoes a costume change. Actually undergoes a few costume changes during the course of the play that you ought to be alert to. He's got the inky black cloak on, you know, at the beginning of the play, the classic melancholy Dane that you all know about. And then during the madness scenes, Ophelia reports that his clothes are all disheveled. Do you remember his stockings are down, and you know, he's going to look like an absolute mess. And then when he does a kind of sea change, if you will, and I mean that quite literally, right? He leaves for England and then comes back. And in the fifth act, he's no longer dressed like a prince. He's in a rather simple traveler's costume. And those costume changes seem to me quite important. And I wonder if Hamlet, at that point, in the gravedigger scene, in short, if he doesn't come to a different view of humanity than from what he had earlier in the play. Whereas earlier in the play, he wonders why live if we're all such sinners, if we're all such beasts, if we seem to act in ways that pull us down the chain of being, if we seem to disappoint in all of our choices, why bother to live? And then in the gravedigger scene, he gets a whole different view of humanity. He kind of trusts to let what happen will happen.
It wasn't really exile when he went back out to sea, not in the sense of Dante being exiled.
No, of course not.
Leaving the scene, he does gain a new perspective.
Yeah, I think he does. I want you guys to think about that, what that new perspective is at the end of the play, that allows him. Well, I guess what I want to ask is he a changed Hamlet in the fifth act as he moves into that final battle scene? Is he a different guy from the guy he was earlier in the play? And I think you all will agree he is. And I want to know, what is it about him that is quite so different? What has changed?
Could it be maturity? A little maturity?
Well, we'll talk about that next time. I'm playing a terrible game, which is let's throw these things out, and then we'll kind of pick them up, give you a chance to think about them, and then we'll pick them up. Again, I'll entertain any questions about this play. Yeah? Oh, I'm sorry, that's not a hand. Yeah.
I had one question. I noticed that they use incest in this play as kind of a main part of, and then in past plays. And I was wondering if the writers used this as, this is something really bad, or was their ulterior motive to titillate the reader?
Yeah, I think not. I don't think this was a titillation.
Okay.
Yeah,
It was just a serious offense.
Yeah, that's an offense against nature. Yeah.
The only thing I could support the incest portion is that he meets his mother in the bedroom.
Yes, the bedroom. How you play that bedroom scene is crucial. Yeah. Have you all seen the Mel Gibson version of Hamlet Light? You really must see that where the speeches are just cut to shreds. They're down to, it's like a Cliff Notes Hamlet. You know, it's really quite bizarre. But they play that scene quite passionately. It's Glenn Close plays Gertrude, and Mel pretty much mounts her in bed, and it's quite a scene. Yeah, it needn't be played that way. Obviously, it was not played that way in many other productions. How do you see Gertrude? Do you see Gertrude as just a power broker, or what do you see?
Susanna said, and I concur, that this is a woman who's always been sheltered and she's been taken care of. And so with whether she even knew that Claudius had murdered Hamlet Sr. or not.
Remains a question in the play.
He courted her. He replaced her husband very satisfactorily in all his promises and actions. So she was moving from the familiar to the familiar, which is her way of survival.
Yes, she's less an actor than one acted upon. Yeah. She's surrounded by very strong wills, and those strong wills move her. Would you say the same is true of Ophelia? Or Ophelia seems even lighter, doesn't she? Yeah.
She's very weak-willed because it's her brother and her father who are going against Hamlet, saying, "Why would he marry you? You're nothing."
She does what the good daughter does. She does what her father tells her to do.
Well, I think what she's done is had her own feeling of worth undermined.
Sure.
Systematically.
Sure. Yep.
Yes.
She too is acted upon rather than. So who are the actors? Please do not say the ghost, or I will leave. Who are the actors? Did you see me leading you down this garden path? Who are the actors now?
Mainly Claudius. I think Polonius is such a waffler. He waits to see what people want him to say, and then he says it in such a way that he thinks he's made it up himself and passes as, a learned person, which I feel he was way beyond his depth in his office with the king.
Okay, others, please. Who are the actors in the play?
Well, you have to see Hamlet.
I see Hamlet as a very...
This is a fellow who refuses to act.
But then he does act mad. That's an act. He warns Marcellus and Horatio that I will not be as you know me, in those terms. So he's acting.
I think Hamlet's more subtle in his acting type.
He sure does affect events of the play more than anyone else in the play, yes? Yeah.
He knows he's acting when he does it. I'm not sure the rest do.
He's very subtle. Sly.
Okay. How about how about Fortinbras? Yeah, I think Fortinbras is very important. Yeah.
And Horatio, I think, too.
Oh, well, yeah. Good night, sweet prince. I mean, it's Horatio who gets to...
And who doesn't drink the cup so that he will be there later to tell all this to the world.
Yeah. What's Fortinbras's role in the play?
Well, he's the actor's successor.
He's a man of action, isn't he? When I asked for an actor, there's a guy who's a man of action, Fortinbras. You can't imagine Fortinbras going to be or not to be. It's to do or not to do, if anything, and it's probably to do. Yeah, Fortinbras is very much the man of action. Does that mean that the play then is killing off those who are not worthy of executive leadership and rewarding Fortinbras with that position because he has the right qualities?
It would seem so.
Is the play endorsing the leadership qualities of Fortinbras? No. I keep asking nasty little questions here, which you probably want to think a little bit about before you answer. You want to?
I have a sense that Fortinbras is the inevitable conclusion, and that the drama of the whole thing is how the people that are bound to be crushed in his accession play out their final hours, and reveal themselves in the way they work out their fate.
Yeah. So the stage has to be cleared of people like this to make ready Fortinbras's accession to power.
I think I may be more in sympathy with Hamlet here, in that the fact that they're cleared from this particular stage is not the point. The point is how they play out their hour and leave.
Yes, the how is crucial. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The how is crucial, which will lead me to my next question. Why does Hamlet receive a soldier's burial, rites of funeral and burial at the end of the play? A soldier's. What do you make of that?
Wasn't he in the brawl with Fortinbras early in the play, that Hamlet slew somebody? No, that must have been the senior Hamlet.
That's Hamlet
yeah.
Senior. Yeah. Why is Hamlet rewarded like a victorious soldier at the end of the play? I don't understand this. This was a guy who didn't seem to have any of the qualities of the soldier. Didn't have any of those executive qualities of action that were so essential for his role, and yet he's honored at the end with the soldier's rites of burial. What is his war?
His
personal self.
Vengeance for his father's untimely death.
Okay, so
Because
it's
his
revenge. Huh?
Right, but you see, to my mind, executive and soldier are two different things. The soldier obeys the commands to his best of his ability and seizes upon opportunity to carry it through.
I said it wrong then. That's the foot soldier, to be sure, but the Fortinbras has to combine the qualities of the foot soldier and the leader.
Excuse me.
Yeah, there are generals in armies too, and we're really in the realm of generals here, not of foot soldiers.
Is it a final affront to Claudius when he's found guilty and is killed? So giving these rights to Hamlet, possibly maybe he would have been the successor. And it's an affront to Claudius, who would probably be just dumped into any grave because of his deception.
Yeah, well, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm obviously asking an open-ended question. If the struggle in this play, if one of the things that keeps Hamlet from acting is this notion that the world is a fallen world, which clearly is true in this play. If ever there is a fallen world, it's the world of this play. And Hamlet recognizes that, obviously, right? All of his soliloquies reveal that. He recognizes this is a fallen world, to the point where something rotten in the state of Denmark has infected not only the body politic, it has infected the entire cosmos. He doesn't even know why one should live. Life is so rotten. Life is so evil. The problem for Hamlet is the ghost tells him he must act in that fallen world. And not only must he act in that fallen world, he must use the methods of that fallen world to act. You all with me? And Hamlet doesn't want to do that. Hamlet doesn't want to act in a fallen world. He wants to act in an ideal world. Alas, the world is not ideal. He must learn, as we all must learn in a way, how we're going to make it through a fallen world. Sometimes the play seems to be suggesting, this struggle between good and evil is sometimes not an even duel. The final scene, you know, the duel scene, because evil's rapier is poisoned. Yeah. Evil's rapier is poisoned. It's not a fair fight. Evil has the upper hand. So sometimes in this fallen world, you've got to use the techniques of the fallen world to act, and nobody likes to do that.
And when he signs that, when he has his brings out his father's seal and signs that paper on the ship that sentences Guildenstern and what's the
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern
to death, he's fighting the war with their weapons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they were going to murder him.
That's right. That's what he has to learn. One of the things, God knows there are a million things, but one of the things he has to learn is that to act in the fallen world is sometimes to use the methods of the fallen world. It's not a fair fight between good and evil. And thus the wonderfully symbolic duel scene at the end, where the poisoned rapier is exchanged with the good man, and the good man uses the weapon of the fallen world to defeat the fallen world. It's a very interesting, emblematic duel at the end of that play.
When you were talking who's a principal player, could you say it's Shakespeare as Dante entered his world? Shakespeare doesn't mention it, but he does. Shakespeare was a player, and maybe to him, you know, having a play within a play was right up his alley.
Oh, sure.
He had performed too.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, there's a man who knows the stage inside and out. He knows that there is nothing better at the end of the play than exactly, and bodies dropping, you know? Oh, absolutely. And our sympathy is so much with Hamlet, isn't it? Because we are all forced sooner or later to act in the fallen world. And we know the cost, the great cost. What we really want to get to, and I think we're going to have to do this next time, is what it is that Hamlet wins to that allows him to enter this duel, a duel that he has refused up to Act 5 to enter. What has happened to him? What has happened to his perspective? What has happened to his head that allows him to duel with evil the way he does in that final scene? And what allows him to die on that stage knowingly, as he does? He knows he's giving up his life for a cause. What allows him to do that? And then perhaps the larger question is why we endorse Horatio's last words when we say, "Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest." Where we have this tremendous sense of loss at the end of this play, even as we have a sense of triumph. And that's what we'll do next time. Thanks. Yeah, that was fast, wasn't it? Yeah. Where did that go?